Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Infosys founder Mr. Narayana Murthy recently said he was wrongly idealistic about not letting his wife, Sudha Murty, join Infosys. He said something similar in a conversation with MD and CEO TV9 Network, Barun Das, in an episode of Dialogue with Barun Das recorded last June. Mr. Narayana Murthy was asked why his wife, Sudha Murty, then Kulkarni, was not on the board of Infosys. He replied that even though she was the most qualified of all the partners, he did not want friction among the partners. Now, we're coming into an era when the representation of women in the boardroom is not that high. It's worrying, in fact. And joining me to discuss this trend today are Sairee Chahal, founder and CEO, Sheroes, and business strategist Lloyd Mathias, my colleague Kartik Malhotra. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. But first, let's listen into the part of the dialogue question we asked Mr. Narayana Murthy to give you the context for what we are talking about today.
Mr. Murthy, you have been known for your generosity as well, right? And you had often said that you didn't mind giving away. You had made the culture of distributive justice in India, in the corporate world. You led the way. Do you ever think that you could have ceded the seat of the chairperson and Infosys were built by a Kulkarni, not by a Murthy? Has it ever crossed your mind? Your vision is there, but there was a person.
No, I think right in the beginning, we both discussed, of all the wives of the founder and the co-founders, she is the most qualified. She was first rank in all her
not only wives, she was the most qualified amongst all the founders.
Number two, she had a distinction in her master's degree. She had got a scholarship to one of the most famous universities in the world, all of that for her PhD. So on the question of merit, she was clearly the best. There was no doubt. I mean, I'm using data. I'm not making any conjecture.
As you said that.
However, we both sat down and discussed whether both of us should be in it or one of us should be in it. I think my view was, at that point in time, I was trying to reduce unnecessary friction amongst the group of founders. My view was, even though she is the most qualified person, if she were to become a part of it, then somebody else will, my wife will also become. They may not be suitable, but I wanted to avoid all those issues. That's the reality. Therefore, Sudha was very kind to say, look, I want you to have peace, and this is your dream. So you run this marathon, and I will look after our kids, and I will raise them as children with good values and with good accomplishment. And that she did better than I expected.
No, better than any one of us seen ever.
Yeah, in some way, yes. So therefore, there was a reason why both of us decided that we should not have a situation where there could be some unnecessary friction. Even though data was on her side, absolutely. There is no argument on that.
The most favorite statement of yours that you believe in God, the rest must bring
That's
data.
right. She was very kind, and she said, this is your dream, so go ahead and do it. And I want to do something which is even more important for our family, which is bringing up two wonderful children. And frankly, I'm very, very proud of that.
To all of
Children
us,
who who did very well in education, children who have shown wonderful values. I think that is very
That is
important.
brilliant.
Fascinating conversation, Kartik. And you were there, right, when Narayana Murthy said this. It's possibly one of the greatest what ifs of corporate India. What if Sudha Murty had been part of the Infosys board? She could have actually headed the company and become, who knows, chairwoman.
You're right. In fact, that was pretty much the next question that Barun Das had posed to Sudha Murty,
Yeah.
that do you regret not being the chairwoman or the chairperson? And
Yeah.
he said that, chairwoman could have been a legitimate language word in the English language.
Right.
And of course, at that time, Sudha Murty also said that she had no regrets because she would not have been able to build Infosys Foundation and she would not have been able to raise the family that she did
Yes.
had she been equally busy as Narayana Murthy, doing a full-time job at Infosys.
Right. Sairee, and I want to ask you this question, that what Kartik just mentioned, the fact that why is it that women are the ones who have to choose between the house and their professions? And Sudha Murty took the call of raising her children and she kind of sacrificed that thing and she said, you go ahead and do it. It sounds very, cinematic when you listen to it. But what are your thoughts on this?
So exactly, I had the same thought that, if Mr. Murthy was asked to do the reverse, right? What if Sudha Murty was building the company and the choice fell upon him raising children? Would he have made that call? We don't know. But we know for a fact that caregiving in India falls upon women.
Yes.
We all know a woman in our family, in our neighborhood, who has given up her career to make sure caregiving duties are met. And it's
Right.
not just children, it's elderly parents, it's home moves, it's family business, it's corporate jobs of the men in the family. So we know for a fact that women do make bigger sacrifices, and it's an unsaid rule, right? Nobody's put this out there, but and I think the root of all this has two very strong behaviors. One is, I totally believe that caregiving work and cooking and bringing up a home are life skills, and in some ways I think we teach our women or teach our girls, but we leave the boys out of it. And I've been saying this a long time. Start doing this in school, start imparting life skills and caregiving skills in schools to girls and boys equally, so that when they grow up, this is not a choice, everybody contributes. And second, of course, I think change begins in the boardroom. The reflection of who's in the boardroom seeps in the society, in our stock exchanges, in all our stakeholder conversation, in the kind of employees we have, the kind of culture we have. While Infosys is a unique example, I think we know of enough companies where corporate cultures are not up to the mark. And I think making sure they're equally diverse, they're equitable, they're fair boardrooms is a very humongous task ahead of us, given the ambition of India Inc. And the third point I want to make is women have to work doubly hard to get the same success. Had Sudha Murty taken that call, or we all know women who are in boardrooms, who've gotten to the C-suite, the work for them is doubly hard, because not only they're challenging the norm in the boardroom, but they're also doing the heavy lifting of, making sure things are fair at home and everything runs on time and the trains run on time.
Right, absolutely, Sairee. And I think Sudha hasn't done too bad herself. I mean, if she were asked, where's your daughter and where does she stay? And, and we all know the answer to that, 10 Downing Street. But Lloyd, your thoughts on this fascinating conversation between Barun Das, Narayana Murthy and Sudha Murty, where that absolutely delightful revelation from the blast from the past, and what if Sudha Murty had taken the step and indeed become chairwoman of Infosys.
Yeah, I think that was truly an exceptional conversation. I think firstly, I really think that hats off to Mr. Murthy for being so candid about a past story. The realization or the fact that there was this opportunity where it could be either one or the other, and for whatever reason, as a couple, they chose between them that she would step aside and take over family responsibilities. which in reality is possibly as big, if not a bigger task than what he did. Of course, history would have been altered, but I think it's very, very honest and straightforward of him. And obviously, bigger compliments to Mrs. Murthy. I think the very fact that she so graciously agreed to, do what to bring up children, which I think is remarkable. I think, having said which, I'd agree with a lot of the points that Sairee made, that Indian culture typically has kind of put the onus of home tasks with the woman, right? Unfortunately so, but I think culturally that's the way we've evolved. And I think the time for change is well nigh upon us. And we have enough role models, both within India, if you look at a Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, or ladies who've done great things, and obviously internationally, starting with Indra Nui. So I think it's clearly time, but a lot of the change will be cultural, which I have to start from the family, which is when you realize that both male and female offspring have an equal right and an equal opportunity within a company setup. And obviously, this also needs to be fostered by progressive organizations. We've seen large organizations, large family-run organizations where the daughter of the house doesn't get as much responsibility. But I do believe that is changing, and I think the time is ripe. So I'm very glad that Mr. Murthy was so candid in this conversation. This has actually flagged off this debate, and I think it was much needed. And hopefully, it will be one step towards
But Lloyd, coming to the present, the fact that you had the Companies Act that was modified about a decade ago, which made it mandatory for at least one woman to be on the board of directors, but yet their numbers don't seem to have really taken off that much. The representation of women on boards is still, in single digits percentage-wise. Why is that the case? 40 years after this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sandeep, and you're right. I think back in 2014, SEBI mandated that every company should have at least one woman director. I understand right now the number is somewhere in the mid-70s, that 3 in 4 companies have fully complied. A lot of large companies, including public sector undertakings, haven't fulfilled that, which is kind of unacceptable. But I think sooner than later that's bound to change. I'm aware of the fact that a large global investment firm undertook a study to understand how many companies in India actually have followed this principle, and then went further to look at the 70-odd% that have actually complied with having one woman director, to see how many of these women directors are truly independent, not relatives, not spouses, daughters, sisters of the promoting family. And that number dropped by another 50%. So you're talking of less than a third of companies that have taken on the responsibility or taken on the task of getting one woman director, truly independent. Therefore, it's very clear that if a company is not willing to comply with both the letter and the spirit of the law, then they should not be investment worthy, right? And I think the message is getting across. So I think companies are recognizing. And I think more than just the economic imperative, I think progressive and smart companies recognize that whatever business you are in, 50% of, let's say, your consuming population is women. And if you don't get some degree of reflecting that aspect into your highest decision-making levels, you're actually handicapping yourself as a business, right? Women not only bring a great understanding of what one half of the world wants, I think they bring certain additional skills when it comes to empathy, when it comes to understanding, which possibly get missed out in boards that are devoid of females. So I think it is, we have to move in the right direction, but it is tragic, if I can say pathetic, that a lot of companies still haven't complied with something as basic as this.
Absolutely. And Kartik, I want to ask you these figures, like in 2022, we're looking at the women just accounting for 7.2% of executive positions on boards compared to just 6% in 2017. Why is the growth so slow?
What really happens is, unfortunately, in our society, Sandeep, the common understanding is that a woman at best to occupy any CXO position is best suited for the role of CHRO. And it is this perception, right or wrong, I don't know. I don't know if there is data to prove it or contest it otherwise, suggesting that because women are seemingly higher on the emotional quotient, EQ, and that tends to overshadow perhaps the actual IQ of women. So I think one broad level understanding or misunderstanding is that women are better suited for HR roles and HR roles only. The second problem is, which again has to do a lot with the culture, even when women have a good head start in their careers, even when their career is on an upswing, in their late 20s, early 30s, when they decide to have a child, maternity comes with a lot more baggage than just bearing that child for 9 months.
Yes.
And unfortunately, when you're out of action for those 9 months, if not those 9 months, maybe, you know, the 6 months after that, which is your maternity leave, when you come back and when you want flexibility, that is difficult to come by. So I think corporations across the board are not evolved enough yet to empathize with what the woman's anatomy, the body has gone through, and help them ease back into work. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, their absence is seen as an opportunity for somebody else who's not a woman or not a pregnant woman at that time to step into the role being performed by that woman who's gone on leave. And then when the woman who had actually gone on maternity leave comes back, you know, the chair is occupied by somebody else.
Right.
So perhaps we don't have enough checks and balances, enough systems in place to enable these women to get what is rightfully theirs when it comes to the education and the experience and the skills that have gone into them getting that position. For them to hold on to it and build on it after
Yes.
maternity becomes a major drawback for them.
So there's a sort of an entrenched gender bias, and I want to ask Sairee this. Sairee, do you believe there is a kind of entrenched gender bias in Indian boardrooms?
There sure is. I think if you're a woman in a boardroom today, chances are you're seriously outnumbered. When I started doing board positions, in fact, the first board I joined was a all-male board. I was the first woman on the board, and then we brought in, you know, more women directors, and we became a 50% women board. But that took time. That took, you know, a couple of years. I do believe it is, I think, a series of dominoes effect. You know, whether you look at, I think, the chain of the STEM pipeline or the MBA pipeline, and I think the boys club starts propagating there, and then I think propagates itself for the next 60, 70 years. The good news here is two numbers that are very heartening. One is India has actually, for the first time, more women passing out of MBA schools than men at this point in time.
Yes.
And this is last year's data, 2023 data. And the second number is that India now has an equal number of women, almost equal, 45 to 48% of women in STEM pipelines. So we hope that, you know, a couple of decades down the line, the boys club is not just a boys club, it's actually a lot more equitable pipeline of recruits coming in from the bottom. And the other point is, of course, you know, I don't think we need to treat maternity as a women's issue. I think families belong to both men and women. And we are also seeing that families are not just one kind of family anymore. I think the idea that a family is just a man, woman, child is a 100-year-old idea. But I mean, you know, if we go by where the world is today, you know, 2 men can have a family and 2 women can have a family.
Yes.
And if workplaces are not prepared to be family friendly and child friendly and care friendly, it's not just for maternity that women go away. They also go away when parents are aging, when families need time. So I think this equitable distribution of caregiving across, and companies recognizing the fact that men also have families they can tend to. And it's unfortunate that, you know, men are given only 15 days of paternity leave, while some of them could be full-time caregivers in their respective families. So we are still a very, very nascent a society in terms of how we are thinking about it. And I think it needs to reflect in a lot more progressive new world order. The world's changing and we need to change as well.
Yeah, we need to change as well. And the point that you made, Sairee, is very interesting. You know, the caregiving needs to be distributed. It can't be the women's preserve alone. Lloyd, how much of an issue is that? Once, do you think that is the nub of the issue, the caregiving thing? Once that is kind of, you know, distributed among the two partners, women would be kind of, you could kind of unleash their animal spirits in the, you know, corporate arena.
Absolutely. I think equitable caregiving would address the issue to a large extent. Having said which, I think it's easier said than done. the realization there's one aspect which is biological, the fact that the woman would logically be taking some time off for childbearing. The other, I guess, is the unfortunate realization or recognition that the corporate world doesn't regard that time taken off for childbearing in early years. It's always a bit of a catch-up that the lady has to play, that she actually took time off work. Not recognizing that what she's done in the interim is something that, to my mind, would add immensely to her capability as an office worker. So I think that's one recognition. The second point, and I think Sairee touched upon that, is the good news is that the pipeline is getting more equitable. I think the second point is the recognition that a diverse workforce makes a company, shall we say, slightly more market savvy. The fact that you've got a great representation of the population to who you're selling or serving, I think makes for a positive. The third point I want to bring in is the recognition that a lot of the investment community has to learn to reward progressive companies. Companies that are proactive, that are willing to, recognize that, family raising is a responsibility, a joint responsibility of either gender. I think if the investment community starts rewarding and recognizing organizations like this, I think that will persuade a lot more companies, right? Today, a lot of companies, always use the excuse that, a woman worker could be less productive because she's going to take time off, because the onus of running the family is predominantly hers, even when it comes to taking care of aging parents. I think as long as that cultural bias exists and companies begin to look at that, there's always going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for an office worker versus her male counterpart. And I think, therefore, some level, the investment community also has to wake up, just like they did rewarding companies for their environmental consciousness, rewarding companies for their larger governance issues. I think the time is about right that companies start recognizing equity as a significant part of their investment objective.
Well, it's been a while since Narayana Murthy and Sudha Murty had that conversation over 40 years ago. And as my co-panelists, Sairee Chahal and Lloyd Mathias just mentioned, and Kartik, of course, the fact that we still have a long way to go, and we can only hope that it's sooner and not later. You can watch that fascinating dialogue with Barun Das episode only on the News9 Plus app. Do download it and watch. I'd like to thank Sairee and Lloyd for joining us. Kartik, Malhotra. News and developments continue on the News9 Plus show. Thanks for watching. Indian political parties have always wooed their voters with various allurements, and these are, free gifts, freebies, cash incentives, and even liquor. But of late, these freebies have taken on gigantic proportions. They're literally bursting the banks of state finances. And we are asking this question, how long can states sustain this new culture of freebienomics? Joining me to discuss this today are Yatish Rajawat, CEO, Center for Innovation in Public Policy, and my colleague Ghulam Jilani. Welcome to the News9 Plus show, gentlemen. Yatish, I want to start by asking you, how do freebies and subsidies of the kind that we have seen in the last couple of months, which are being promised by state governments at the elections, how are they impacting on state fiscal health?
Sandeep, the issue is that most states are almost veering towards bankruptcy. Most states have, take a state like Punjab, their revenue to interest ratio is something like 22%. That means that 20% of their revenue is actually going into paying interest on debt because they don't have sufficient revenue. They are borrowing to meet their existing requirement. So if a state is, if this was a normal household budget and the household was paying 20-25% as interest payment, then there is something fundamentally wrong with managing finance in that household, and therefore in these states. These states are not capable of meeting their operational requirements, in the sense that in some cases, like in case of Punjab and Tamil Nadu, they actually have to borrow every year to meet the salary of their temporary workers.
Right.
And this is a serious concern. Now, in this environment, if you if you decide to kind of give a something kind like the old pension scheme, which was where the this freebies topic actually started,
Yeah.
when the states started reverting back to the OPS, you are actually borrowing to pay pension to people who've already left your government,
Right.
and hence the burden of both interest and debt actually increases for the state going forward.
Right.
So there is actually there is very little fiscal room left for the state to actually do anything else. So they keep borrowing and they keep paying out these incentives or these, I don't like the word freebies too much, because it kind of clubs everything that a state does on the welfare side as something that is given away free. But these are fiscally irresponsible decisions that states are taking, are doing just because there is a political incentive to do this.
Right. In fact, Gulam, I want to bring you in on this, that the story that you just did on sticker shock, how they are a recipe for disaster. Can freebies, as Yatish was saying, can they be a substitute for public welfare? And how do you tell the difference when it's a freebie is a freebie and when it's public welfare?
See, Sandeep, the freebie is an old thing. It's been there since 1960s when, the then Tamil Nadu Chief Minister started that, 4.5 kg rice for 1 rupee. It's been there for decades. Now it has grown to such a level that it has become a burden on the states.
Right.
As you rightly said, for some, there is a public welfare thing that the government is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So if you talk about public welfare, it means access to education, access to healthcare, access to good schools, access to good hospitals, access to roads and other things, which are mandated for the government. But when it comes to freebies, it mainly covers free doles.
Right.
For example, you saw in the recent elections, some political parties are giving free scooties.
Right.
Some political parties we have seen in the past have given pressure cookers.
Yes.
Some have given sardines. Even liquor was one of the freebie, mostly in South, which we saw. So there's a basic difference between a freebie and a public welfare. We have none other than RBI governor, former RBI governor saying it cannot be a substitute for public welfare.
Right.
If you look at the states, as our guest was saying, look at Karnataka, where Congress won the election last year and, on the promise of 5 guarantees.
Yes.
There is not a proper study, but one study by SBI says it can amount to 60,000 crores.
Right.
Which is huge. Look at Rajasthan. Congress lost the election recently. In Rajasthan, there were 9 schemes. There's a PRS legislative study which says that the 9 schemes were around 37,000 crores, which is 1/3 of the tax and non-tax revenue of the state.
Right.
If you look at over the years, it's been there, as I said earlier, but the debate is now because last year we saw Prime Minister Modi saying that revenues are dangerous.
That's right. Revenues are,
are dangerous for the democracy, for developing nations. We have Supreme Court hearing a case. We have none other than former Election Commission O.P. Rawat flagging the freebies. We have as the guest was saying, you look at free healthcare, free education, free roads, but look at OPS. Raghuram Rajan, he wrote a book. He was giving an interview, I think 2 weeks ago, in which he said OPS will eventually lead to burden on the state.
Yes.
If you look at budget estimates of 2024, there are at least 11 states which are deficit, which have deficit revenue, which are revenue deficit. So it gives a picture that freebies are ultimately, they are creating a fiscal problem for the states, and eventually they have to borrow money from the center.
Right.
And
Yatish, when does a freebie stop being a freebie and cross the line and become public welfare? Because a lot of people back in the day questioned this midday meal scheme. It was said to be a freebie, it's a SOP, but now, as we know, 4 decades later, it's transformed the lives of so many school children, and especially women in Tamil Nadu were empowered because of that.
The best way to understand the difference between a public welfare program and a freebie is the amount of time does it take to, is it a consumable or is it used for consumption, or is it used for some kind of long-term gain for public good?
Right.
So if you take a case of the midday meal,
Yeah.
the objective of the meal was not to feed the children. The objective of the meal was to attract students into the school
Absolutely.
during lunchtime, so that that becomes an incentive for the parent to send this child to school, and they also got a meal there.
Yes.
Now, this was basically done to counter the practice of putting the child to work or at home,
Yeah.
or not sending him to school. So the objective was not feeding or giving rice away or giving dal away,
Right.
or so that is a short-term measure. It does not do anything else but leads to immediate consumption by that household.
Right.
In case of, when we say that this is a freebie and this is not, like for instance, in the case of the pension scheme, what we are saying that there is a pensioner who was earlier getting X amount of money, and we shifted that burden because it is a burden that is continuous and long-term in nature. We shifted that burden to market in the sense that we created a corpus and we put all that pension burden onto that corpus. Now, if we revert back and we keep increasing his pay every time that there is a pay increase for the state government, we are
Yes.
increasing the burden on the state finances. So
That's
now
right.
it's not adding any value in the long term. It's just being given away because it will add votes to the political party that gives
Right.
it, And this is now clearly reflected. If you look at the top three states, Bihar, Karnataka, and Telangana, these are states in which the actual interest expenditure between financial year 19 to financial year 22 has gone up between 50% to 72%. And this has largely happened because these states have borrowed money to either give dal, rice, or that kind of stuff to the people, or as your colleague was pointing out, they've given freebies like a swing machine or a washing machine. These giveaways do not really add anything to the economy. Like if you were to build a new school,
Yeah.
why don't we call it as a freebie? Because basically that new school is the infrastructure, and children get educated and they become productive sources. So it is a productive expenditure. It's not a short-term expenditure which does not add anything to the economy. So that is the differentiation that most policymakers derive when they're defining whether this is just a revenue or this is actually public expenditure that is good for public and is long-term in nature.
Right.
So that's the classical definition that you would like to draw between a freebie and a public welfare expenditure.
Right. But Yatish, you think it's actually going to get worse now? This competitive freebienomics between political parties and states, indeed, is it in the years ahead, given the pressures on political parties, is it going to intensify?
Yes, it's a given, because once this competition starts and this becomes a norm, political reality tells you that every political party will follow the same process. If somebody is giving a sewing machine, the other will give a washing machine plus a sewing machine.
Right.
So the competitive politics is such. The only way to prevent it is that the state's ability to borrow or to execute, it is curtailed either by the central government or it is curtailed by the Reserve Bank of India. And if you see the pre-COVID years, the borrowing capacity of most states was curtailed. They were asked not to borrow. Most of their central funding was linked to the fact that they follow fiscal prudence, and it had led to a reduction in their debt and all. But due to COVID, both the central government opened up its basically limits for borrowing by states, and they have just gone hyper on borrowing. And this is fundamentally, it doesn't add any long-term economic value, because the political party basically bankrupts the state government. And
Right.
we've seen it in the case of Tamil Nadu. We're seeing it in West Bengal. We're seeing it in Kerala. We saw it in Madhya Pradesh also. The Madhya Pradesh government's borrowing suddenly jumped in the last 5-6 years. Even in Punjab, it just skyrocketed. And
Yeah.
these are states which do not have, Punjab does not have any great economic growth or any great economic
Yes.
activity happening there. So it's a cycle which is vicious, and it is incestuous in the sense that the state will find it increasingly difficult to get out of it, even if there is a conservative government that comes back into power in these
Absolutely.
states.
And it's a cycle that's vicious. It's a cycle that's incestuous, as Yatish just mentioned. Thank you very much for your comments, Yatish and Gulam. That story of yours, you can watch our story Freebie Movement only on the News9 Plus app. Download and watch. Nearly 100,000 Indians tried to cross over into North America illegally last year. Why is this happening? What explains this donkey network that we all saw in a Shah Rukh Khan film lately? Now, joining me to answer this is Khalid Arshad, immigration lawyer based in Canada. Khalid, welcome to the News9 Plus show. I just want to ask you, why is this surge of illegal immigrants into North America happening?
It has been happening for so long, and now with this latest implosion and explosion of social media and the socio-economic conditions that are hitting India on the ground level, I believe that is one of the major reasons why there has been an absolute surge and explosion in the amount of people who are running towards USA, Canada, UK, and everything else. Not only people who want to come illegally, but also people who are coming here on legal migration, like on PR and on work permit and study permit. So it's both ways. I think the surge is because we're talking about illegal migration. It has got to do a lot with the situation that is currently in their home country, as also that you have that historical reasons that everybody is already going. So we need to also go that conditioning from a very young age.
Now, why are more Indians taking this Central America route into the United States?
There is no specific reason as such that why, because these people, you need to understand, they are in a position of take it or leave it, right? So they are usually at the whims and fancies and the mercies of these agents, consultants, or donkers, who you want to call them. So, I mean, beggars can't be choosers, right? If they can get the money intact, they just go to the agent and are like, you know what, just get me through. They don't have any autonomy or freedom to decide which route they want, which route they don't want. So the first person on the boat actually ships out. It's something like that. So there's no preference as such that why they're taking the Central America route. Technically, logistically, yes, because it is the route that has been taken by a lot of people earlier. It is only now that it has come into the public glare. But it has always been the route, from my understanding, that Central America has been the easiest route to get into the USA and then further on to Canada. So there's no recent trend or that only now for the first time people are resorting to Central America. It's always been that.
What's the latest trend that you've noticed in this illegal migration pattern that sends these migrants into the United States?
Western countries, you also need to understand that they don't welcome illegal immigration, but in a way they sort of look the other way. So surveillance in terms of Western countries to block illegal immigration has not been really put on the high threshold, because these countries also sort of want people to come in a way, so as to say. So it is not that illegal immigration is increased because that there is increased surveillance. It is just that it has always been there, and these countries, whatever they do, whatever surveillance they do, people are still going to find some way or the other. So it's not to do with the surveillance of the countries, but the intention of the people who want to come. So for instance, for Canada and for USA, their borders are still very much porous to let people in. So despite knowing that there is a spike in illegal immigration, to my knowledge, there has not been any renewed or sustained efforts to increase surveillance or to put in place measures that don't allow for people to get in.
Are Canada and other Western countries, have they increased surveillance? And this is one of the reasons that these illegal migrants have started taking more dangerous routes.
And a parenthesis fashion, this has always been happening, right? And people have been using a lot of ways to get into. Chartered flights have been in the play for quite some time. And in terms of significance, this is really significant because now the authorities have been alerted, or at least the public has been alerted to these flights being operated, donkey flights, because usually people used to take those normal commercial flights. Chartered flights have been going on for quite some time. It's only now because of this, the battery refueling incident, that this has come into the fore. So significance, yes, it might definitely impact a lot of people who are taking these routes. The touts would be a little bit more careful, but this is just, it's not going to stop. It's going to keep on happening the way just this has been happening, and we'll see new and new means and methods of people trying to get in through flights and boats and whatnot. So you may even have, if there's a new vehicle or new means of transportation in the future, you'll see people try to migrate in that as well.
Now, we recently saw a case of a chartered flight being hired by illegal immigrants to go enter the United States via Nicaragua. How significant is this recent case?
This is a question that really touches my heart. And frankly, you need to understand the reason why people want to go. Even if you give them the entire world on a platter, they would still want to go. That is what a human heart is all about. So the reasons that people usually leave their home countries, whether India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or any of these countries, Latin America, is the fact that they think that they will have a better life abroad. So even if Indian government or the Pakistani government or the Sri Lankan government, Mexican government was to give everything to their people would still want to go. But I think to a large extent, it could be decreased if the normal people who are running away as illegal immigrants, if they are given more opportunities to be at home and sort of earn a livelihood with which they could take care of their families and provide for them and sustain them. I believe it has got to do a lot with economic livelihood and other things. For instance, the socio-economic conditions of people in these home countries, people fleeing from war, people fleeing from poverty, people fleeing from persecution. So if these things could be taken care of, not only that employment is generated or people are getting to earn their livelihood, other things from which people are fleeing, right? Like I said, poverty and all these things, if these could be taken care of at the ground level by these countries, then perhaps this exodus to foreign countries would sort of decrease largely, right? If not totally. So it's got to do a lot with things happening at the countries from where people are going, and very little that can be done by the countries where people are actually reaching. So the recipient country has got less to do in order to decrease migration, illegal migration. There's a lot to be done at the end of the country from where they are leaving. So Punjab government has said that, Bhagwan Man, that people will not go because we're going to create infrastructure. So if this sort of messaging is given to the people by the people in power, that we have everything that you need right here, we will provide, don't leave. That psyche, that is going to perhaps change the psyche of the people to go out and leave and lead a far more wretched life than they are currently living in their own home countries.
Thank you very much for your comments, Khalid. And the Donkey Network is a story that we'll be closely watching. In fact, we've got a series on this, the Donkey Network. Download our app now and watch. Thanks for watching.